Lindsay Adler here, and this week is a photo critique of your color gel photography. Now, I got a lot of great submissions, and the photographs that I chose, it wasn't because they were good, and it wasn't because they were bad. It was because there was something teachable in the photograph, something that I wanted to share to help pass on to all of you. Now, if you like the style of color gel photography and you want to learn more, I have a tutorial, The Magic of Gels, that is a 3-hour video tutorial, and it has a companion guide with more than 35 different gel photography setups. So with that being said, let's jump into these critiques and take a look at what you've created. What I really liked about the use of gels in this image is that the color is telling a story. And so when I looked at this photograph, what I assume it is that it's telling the story of Sweeney Todd. And so if you know the story, the boy, he actually has a razor in his hand, and Sweeney Todd ends up murdering some of his clients. And so that's the story that I'm seeing here. And so what I like so much about the use of the gels is that they're telling a story. Red is obviously ominous and blood, and there's red throughout, red of the background, the red of his tie, and then of course the gels to bring it all together and communicate that story. What I thought was actually really impressive about the use of the gelled rim light here is that it's not just a straight rim light. In other words, it's not just coming in from either side of the subject. You can actually see that a lot of that red light is from the top down. So it's lighting the top of the boy's hat and also the gentleman's hair. And that's actually pretty hard to do, so it's really impressive. It's really well done. And it's definitely telling the story. Now, I think that the image looks great. Maybe I would have gone with a little bit more dramatic lighting, a little bit darker shadows, a little bit more sculptural light, just because it is meant to be an ominous story we're telling here. But it does look good regardless. Now, as I was looking at this photo, I thought it felt a little bit flat. And I knew that that's something that we could bring in and improve a little bit in Photoshop. So what I did is I started by doing one of my favorite color grades, which is taking a black and white layer and changing the blend mode to soft light. What this does is it dramatically increases the contrast of the photo. Now, this is a really strong color grade, really strong contrast. Of course, you can back off the opacity and find what you think fits best, maybe something as a little bit of a middle ground there. Now, the other thing I would say would improve this photograph is I feel that my eye keeps getting drawn a little bit to his shirt. It's a little bit lighter, maybe a little bit to the top of the hat. And so what I did is I went around with curves. You could also use levels, and I just darkened those areas down a little bit so your eye can be drawn to where it's meant to be. With the razor here, if it could be turned a little bit so it's a little bit easier to read visually, I also think that would make for a little bit better impact. It would be easier to read right away. But genuinely, I think the use of gels is really powerful here, really well done, a lot of nice control, and it is used in a way that tells a story, which I really appreciate. For this image, you can tell that the photographer was thinking about how to use gels in the location in a way that makes sense. So in other words, instead of just throwing, a red, purple, whatever colored gel, they actually chose a gel that made sense for the environment. So you can see in the background, there are lights of a building. It's got that warm yellow-orange glow to it. And so it would make sense that perhaps in the environment the subject would be in, there would also be a warm yellow light. Now, clearly there wasn't one, and they've introduced a gel here, which is lighting the side of the subject. But I like it because it unites the subject with the scene. It makes sense. A couple of things I would have improved. I think that you notice how the light is kind of cut off midway on her face, right? It's blocked. That's because it's hitting her shoulder because the light is a little bit lower. If you raise that light up just a little bit more, it would perhaps kiss her face more evenly. And I think that could be an improvement, not a big deal. I also think that this yellow is a little bit of a yellow green rather than a yellow orange, and you definitely see more of an orange in the background. So perhaps you could use a gel that had more orange to it, or you are in luck. It's pretty easy to do in Photoshop. I went to hue saturation, selected the yellows, and made them a little bit more in that orange hue. And so I think that actually fits better with the environment. Now, as I look at the light on her face, not the gel, but the actual light on her face, I'm thinking that maybe it could be a little bit warmer, especially if she's wandering around at night and the warm light of the lampposts are hitting her. And so one of the things I went in and did is I warmed up the white balance overall. You don't need to do that. It's just a thought. You could give that a try, and you could also back it off. So just to show you the before after. So it's just a little bit warmer in the photo overall, and those rim lights make a little bit more sense. Now, for shooting in the moment, something that I thought that could also be improved, if it were possible, is if maybe there were more of these yellow orange lights visible on the left-hand side. Because right now, it's interesting back here. I've got the orange here, I've got the building, but then over on the left-hand side, it's kind of this dark spot that draws my attention because of the highlight on this metal or whatever this was. So if you could Photoshop that out, maybe remove it, if ideally there were some more of these lights, it would actually frame the subject better, and it would create better balance to the photograph overall. All right, next up we have an image that is very much red, white, and blue. So there's definitely a color story being told here, kind of a warm and cold. It also has a little bit of Americana feel. I thought it was interesting that the subject's looking over her shoulder, also that it's an unusual look. I think perhaps the eyes might be looking a little bit too far. I did feel like I was really focusing on the whites of the eyes, but it works. It makes it interesting. The use of the gels is actually really well done. I like the blue of the background. I like the blue a little bit in the shadow side of the face and the red in the hair. Now, right now when I look at the image as is, my eye is really drawn to the red of the hair. It's such an aggressive, powerful color. The blues are receding. And so I want to find some other way to balance the red of the gel in the hair. Now, the lip is red, but it's more of a like magenta maroon red. And so I think a way to create balance and to make the red of the gel make more sense would be to actually use a brighter red on the lip. So what I've done in post is I've gone in and I've brightened up the red of the lip. This is not the way you necessarily would want to do it. Ideally, you would actually do it with makeup, but you see how it makes the lip make more sense with the color of gels. I think that would be a little bit more effective. I didn't do this, but you could also come in and make the eyes a little bit more blue to unite them with the scene. So it's, again, you're really using color to the max on purpose. A couple other things that aren't actually lighting related. One of the things I would do is I would actually liquefy in the cheek just a little bit here on the left to make a smooth line. And then the eyelids, ideally you want them to be a little bit more smooth of a line on either side. So just watch what my liquefy does. So I'm just cleaning up lines. I think that it makes the whites of the eyes a little bit less distracting. And then the last thing that I did in post is I just darkened down the shoulder just a little bit. I felt like my eye was being drawn there. So none of that is required, just a couple of things that were drawing my attention. Now, one of the things that I would have done as well in camera ideally is I felt like the palm of the hand is grabbing just a little bit too much attention. For some reason, I feel that because the fingers are hidden, it just looks like a mass of skin of palm. But if I could either see the fingers, that's one way that I think it would make more sense. Or if the palm were turned in towards the neck a little bit more, or if the hand were lowered even. I think all of those things would make the palm less distracting. It's not terrible. It's not bad. I just don't think that the hand is contributing as much. I think it's actually distracting just a little bit. But the lighting, really, really beautiful, really flattering for the subject, beautiful use of color. All right, next up. So I love playing with feathers and unusual props and headpieces and things like this. And I think the eye makeup is really cool because it's mimicking the shape of the feathers and you're creating a character fundamentally. And so what I think is a good use of gels here is that your character is mysterious and these feathers likely have a little bit of that teal, blue, cyan color cast to them. A lot of times they have a little bit of an iridescence. So I like the color choice for the light on the face. That all works for me. But there's a couple of things that I think fall flat. One of the things I notice is that the light obviously coming in from the right-hand side has the gel on it, but the light coming in from the left doesn't. It's quote-unquote white light. Problem is that white light is lighting weird areas. Like it's lighting her ear, for example. I cannot help but look at that ear over and over again. The white light is also filling in the shadow here next to the nose. So now that just doesn't have color. And it's drawing my attention too much. And then the hand has that white light. So I'm not sure that the white light is even necessary at all. Or maybe if I were going to use it, I would use a different color gel instead. So it's more something maybe analogous color. So you pick a bluer color instead of cyan or a teal or something like that. I think that would have been more effective. The other thing you want to be careful of is, as I look at this photo, I knew instantly that the histogram was going to look like this. There aren't really any details in the whites, like there's no white point, and there's definitely no shadows. The photo is very muddy, to be honest. It needs a little bit more pop, a little bit more drama. So I already mentioned one of my favorite color grading techniques. What I'm going to do is take a black and white adjustment layer, and I'm going to turn it to a blend mode of soft light. And this is the contrast that adds at 100%. And I think you'd agree that's probably much closer to what the photographer had in mind. It's really mysterious and dramatic, and there's the right level of contrast. And of course, you can always back off the opacity if you think it's too strong, but I think we need that black point, so I quite like it. A couple other things. I also think that this photo could use a little bit of blue to the shadows, like just a little bit of cooler tint, because right now everything is looking a little bit warm, which it could work, right? The contrast between warm and cool, but I think that mysterious mood that the photographer is trying to create would work better by adding a little bit of blue to the shadows. So this is what I did for a color grade. There's a million ways you could do it. I used selective color, added blue to the blacks. So that would be my take on it. You know, don't take it as gospel. You can treat it how you would. But notice now that we've added the contrast and the color grade, man, I'm still really looking at that ear. So could have been done in camera, ideally. But I did want to let you know you can improve it in post, and I just did this real quick. What I did is I darkened down the ear, and then I painted a little bit of the color of the gel over the ear. Basically, I took a blank layer, and I painted that color and changed the blend mode to color. So now what it does is it makes the ear look a little bit more like it's matching the rest of the face. So to see the before and after, I think that makes a big improvement. But again, if you could try to get the ear not lit in that way in camera, that would be better than having to do it in post. I think this shot looks much better, and I definitely think you're getting that mysterious avant-garde character that the photographer was aiming for. All right, next up, we have this shot, which I can tell that the color gel that the photographer was choosing is on purpose to set a mood. By choosing red, it's meant to be very ominous, very aggressive. I can see that clearly. Now, one of the things that you'll notice is, do you see how the skin that's lit by the red, it looks almost overexposed, like there's no detail. That's something called clipping. And basically, the light becomes so bright, so saturated, that it can't possibly hold any other information. All it holds is information of, hey, this is red. And so usually you want to avoid that. I'm not saying it can't be done. Like, there are photographers who can use gels in such a saturated way. I would just be careful of it. The ways that I see it used well is done in a really graphic composition. So for example, it would be this exact subject here with the red on the face and the red on the arms, but then the background behind them is a really saturated blue, and the pose is really graphic or something like that. A photographer who uses this quite well is a photographer by the name of Klein. If you look him up, you'll see where he uses super saturated colors almost to the point of clipping. I think the reason it doesn't quite work as well here is because I look at this, it's graphic, it's saturated, but then back down here in the bottom left-hand corner, the light's just kind of normal, and I'm drawn to all of this. It's not as clean, and I think that would be more effective if you could have a cleaner background composition, something like that. All right, next up, this is a very fun use of a gel, and I applaud the photographer for trying something different. Now you'll notice that this starts to be almost that super saturated red, but it still is maintaining detail. It's kind of riding that line. It's not over saturated. I mean, it almost is, but it looks pretty cool. I like that the photographer had a color story going here. It's kind of red lips, red makeup, red flowers, though those are kind of in the magenta tone, a magenta hue. But if you look, the gradient on the edge of that red shadow has a magenta to it. So it actually works for me. Problem is, as I find there to be a couple distractions. I'm crazy distracted by this ear. Ideally, it wouldn't be lit. Ideally, you wouldn't have your eye drawn there. Also, the earring. It's catching so much light. It's a specular highlight. And so I just keep getting my eye pulled down this direction. Also, I feel like the shoulder, because it is a larger area in the frame here, it's grabbing a little bit too much of my attention. So guess what my solution is? My solution is just to crop it. I would probably crop something where I would get rid of the ear. Not like altogether, but, well, actually, maybe I will. Let me see this. Yeah, let's crop the ear. You can include the top of the head. I think right now, if I leave too much space on the right, it won't feel as balanced, so I might just kind of pull it in over here. And I can see a little bit of the earring. I might be inclined to Photoshop that out, but I think a crop like that and then Photoshopping out this little bit of earring would be the most effective way of improving the composition of that photograph and drawing the eye to where it needs to be, which is right here on her face, the makeup, the color, instead of being distracted and pulled towards the edge of the frame. So I definitely think cropping would be improved, but the lighting itself is super interesting and the concept is fun and well executed. All right, well, thank you everybody again for your submissions, and thank you for tuning in. Now, be sure to check out this channel and subscribe because there's going to be a lot more photo critiques in the future. Thanks for joining, and see you next time.